Most pedig kérem fogadják nagy szeretettel professzor Fiona Bullt, aki a WHO, az Egészségügyi Világszervezet egészségpromóciós osztályán belül annak a szakértői csoportnak a vezetője, amely a globális testmozgás akcióterv 2018-2030 implementációját támogatja. Előadásának címe Minőségi testnevelés az Egészségügyi Világszervezet a WHO perspektívájából. Professzor asszony, öné a szó.
Thank you very much. May I extend a very good afternoon to everyone joining this important event, and thank the organisers for the invitation to join the programme. I'm Fiona Bullt from the World Health Organization, and I'm delighted to be participating in this, this conference today, and to join colleagues on the panel for what has been a very interesting morning so far and looks like for the rest of the programme, and bringing to it the perspective from the World Health Organization. I'd like to open by letting the audience know that I commenced my career as a physical education teacher, so this topic is very dear to my heart, and I've already seen and heard a number of the mentors and teachers of myself mentioned in other presentations, particularly Dr. Len Almond from Loughborough University. The field of physical education has come so far, and it has joined with health, and so many of the speakers in this programme is really looking at the intersection of physical education, sport, physical activity, its benefits for individuals, children and society globally. So what I'd like to do is take that health perspective and tell you more about what WHO is doing, and tell you how the work on ensuring boys and girls around the world have access to an enjoyable, inclusive physical education, sport and physical activity experience in their developmental years, and of course become active adults. So in looking at the agenda, I'd like to introduce, for those not familiar, to the Global Action Plan on Physical Activity and Health, developed in 2018 and accepted and endorsed by all member states of the World Health Organization. And in the middle, you see it's physical activity, whether that's walking, cycling, sport, recreation, dance, play. It's all the words we use and all the ways that we can be active. The goal set from the health perspective is to contribute to the globe becoming more active, population becoming more active by 15% by 2030. We already had a goal of a 10% improvement by 2025 as part of a comprehensive approach to tackling the non-communicable disease epidemic. And non-communicable diseases has reached really important profile and media coverage, of course, because it's referred to as the underlying conditions of the COVID-19. But with these goals and with this roadmap, the Global Action Plan on Physical Activity, WHO finds physical activity a very important contributor to improving health. The action plan has 4 policy objectives, which are shown here in the bright colours of 4 distinct areas, and they're all interrelated. So on the left, we want to increase the positive social norms, cultural values and attitudes that will support everyone being active. It's a lot about the education, awareness, advocacy, not just to individuals, but to the society and all the contributors and partners that need to value physical activity in the totality of what it can be to help us achieve the health and well-being benefits. But we can't just tell people, and just like physical education has got a role, we need the environments to be supportive, and that's pillar 2. Creating the spaces and places, whether they're playgrounds or parks, by the river, by the oceans, in the communities and where people live, for making sure people can be active safely and that there's access for all. Number 3 is the programs and opportunities, and you'll see that physical education and school sport and the whole of school approach is a central pillar of number 3. And number 4 is, of course, making sure all of this happens. Just heard from the previous speaker about monitoring and collective action and about policies. And this is the area where we collect data, we monitor, we evaluate, we develop policies to ensure, and of course, financing so that we can have the active nation. Now, all 4 areas form a system, and you'll see more about that whole of system approach shortly. But to segue from the previous speaker talking about the contribution of sport, physical education and physical activity to the SDG agenda, WHO is the custodian of SDG 3.4, and it's a central area for us to improve physical activity to prevent the NCDs and reach this target of a 30% reduction. But the diagram on the left just pulls out some of the other SDGs to which, by being active through the policies, the inclusivity, the equity agenda, the ways we're active, like walking and cycling, can contribute to healthy cities, climate change, peace and justice, and other SDGs. What I'd like to do for my presentation is look at 4 areas where WHO is working to support and advance quality physical education, school sport, and physical activity particularly. So we'll look at the global policy that we develop and hope that you will be users of, global progress in terms of the tools and monitoring that WHO is doing from the health sector, the advocacy agenda, and the partnerships needed. So to complement presentations that you've had this morning already, looking very much at physical education, definitions, terminology, the requirements within schools and the schools approach, let's step back and pick up on the theme of why. Well, physical activity is beneficial for health, and one of the key documents is global guidelines. Last year, for the first time, we looked at the importance of physical activity for very young children under the age of 5. And the document is available on the WHO website. The early years should be when being active is established and, of course, enjoyed. So young children have the habits and start the early years in benefits. You'll see it's divided into 3 groups for that diverse group of under 5s. For older children, 2010 global recommendations were the main policy document for the last decade. And you can see here, and I think all of you know, and the previous speaker's question to the previous speaker asked about indicators. Well, we do know that about at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day is good for children's health. And it should involve a mixture of aerobic activities, include some vigorous intensity activity, and of course, muscle strengthening activity. We know that more is better. So the 60 minutes was in fact just a sort of an optimum to give people a benchmark of what to aim for. But these were 2010, and science develops, and there's a need to update. And WHO was asked to update these guidelines for 2020, a piece of work we've been underway for the last 2.5 years. And I'm delighted to say that we're a week out. So I'm very pleased to join you and share with you that next week we will be launching the new 2020 guidelines on physical activity and sedentary behavior. Very specifically, it's next Thursday, the 26th. These guidelines are developed with an expert panel of scientists from around the world covering all of the different sub-issues that are going to be part of the guidelines. In 2020, they focus on physical activity and sedentary behavior, a very new area and an important area for us to understand from the science, and then to understand what it means for policy and practice and school and children as they grow and develop. The outcomes are listed in the middle. There were many more that's difficult to get onto one slide, and they'll be fully documented in the materials available next week. And on the right, you see who did we look at? Physical activity and sedentary guidelines for who? And we see the youth, adults, older adults, but for the first time, 3 additional groups. People living with chronic disease, which is typically the older adults, and people, children and adults, living with disability. We've also got new guidelines coming on women pregnant and postpartum. So I can't tell you all the details of the guidelines because we launch them next Thursday, but I am able to show you what will be available, and that's going to be a summary document in 6 UN languages. And of course, the main large document, over 100 pages, and a 500-page web annex with all the science. That will be initially English only, and very shortly thereafter, translation is starting for the 5 other UN languages. What will they say? Well, I can tell you that they will reaffirm much of what we knew in 2010, with more data, better quality science, more diverse science, and the take-home message is going to be shown as on this slide, that more physical activity is good for health for all children of all abilities, done in a variety of ways, and that there are benefits from reducing sedentary activities. And we're going to be encouraging all ages to reduce sedentary activity and, of course, to be regularly physically active. The details of this will be in a webinar next week and lots of materials. So I'd like to extend an invitation to all of you to support the launch next Thursday. Look out for it, engage in the media and the social media, communicate the documents throughout your organizations at regional level, national level, community levels, through all the school networks that you're involved with. Include the new guidelines to reinforce your work. Use it for advocacy, of course, on the importance of physical education and school sport. Conduct webinars to discuss and use as an opportunity, a policy window, as many might say. But we certainly need to strengthen the provision of quality PE, the provision of school sport, and the investment, and no more so than during the time of COVID. I mentioned the system when I introduced the Global Action Plan shown on the left. And here is the picture. It's those 4 areas still color-coded, but it's showing you that every recommended action has got links within and between to other parts of the ecosystem that we need to work on to achieve that goal of physical activity improvement, or as I like to say, a more active world. And over on the far right, you will see I've highlighted for this audience that central to creating active people and the programs and opportunities is, of course, quality PE. It's Policy Action 3.1. And I'm delighted that previous speakers have actually outlined so much about what quality PE is, what we know and recommend in terms of a whole of school approach. It's not just the formal curriculum, it is the extracurricular. I enjoyed the provocative questions of what we call physical education. It is traditionally the formal education in the curricula, but of course the physical activity opportunities around schools, in and around schools, is extensive and important to establish and provide opportunities for all children to get and find the activities and the ways to be active that will lead to lifelong physical literacy and participation. Now, in addition, sport is recognised. I just didn't put a circle around it, but 3.3 talks about the importance of how we encourage and extend the sports provision, particularly grassroots and less structured, to provide all children and adults with an opportunity. And then, of course, there's the interlinkages. I often say it's the grey lines of this slide that's as important as what is in the circles. And the system approach tries to create in the minds and a way we approach the work that there are synergies. And if we see the whole system just working on one area is really insufficient, because the environment determines the access to the opportunities. But if there are no opportunities, we need to increase those. So each country and city or community is invited to assess what they're already doing and where they can improve and where they can maximize those synergies. So this is another policy contribution from WHO, which has at its core the importance of quality PE. And a third policy document is here, where we have the Tackling Ncds, a very important document that all ministries of health are very aware of, and it's their toolkit for how to tackle NCDs. It's got an economic analysis in it because it's asking what's the best approaches. And for physical activity, I'm very pleased to indicate that the school setting is recognised and, of course, articulates quality PE, physical activity programs in schools, and the appropriate facilities. So 3 policy documents from WHO, from the health sector, that really echo and reaffirm and join up with the previous documents that have been introduced at a global, regional, and national level. So how is WHO supporting practice and this achievement of the goal? Well, 2 areas. One is providing further tools, particularly through our partners, which are through the Ministries of Health, and hoping that they will work in the partnership with Ministries of Education and others, Ministries of Sport, to deliver the programs and environments. And of course, at the other end, it's the monitoring process. Because if we don't know what's going on, how do we know if we're improving? And how do we know how to improve? WHO, to support the Global Action Plan, has created ACTIVE. It is a technical package from WHO for everyone to use, but it's providing the best evidence on the best ways to promote physical activity. We're already working on 3 supporting modules, and they're shown on the right. They're front covers, and they're currently in production. And one of them is best practice in schools. I'm very pleased to tell you, of course, that it takes a health promoting schools approach. We're also working on one for cities and for walking and cycling. Each toolkit will explain, why do we do promotion of physical activity? How do we do it? What exactly do we mean? And what are the best practice and examples that we can share around the world? We're hearing repeatedly the need to share more what we know works. So WHO is contributing to that, but it'd be essential that we work together across sectors, across the UN family, and across countries and regions to really make sure that the best knowledge is getting out to those who want to do it, and we don't reinvent the wheel or repeat mistakes. What will the schools toolkit focus on? And I'm delighted to say it really just echoes the earlier presentations, what the focus that you would expect, I hope, to see. It is around QPE. We want to make sure across all ages and boys and girls that quality physical education is provided. But in addition, in the school context, travel to school, active recess recreation time, active classrooms, and active before and after school. I'm not going to go into those details because, of course, we are referencing your documents. We don't go into the granular detail in our toolkit. We're hoping to ensure that Ministries of Health are aware and supportive of all of these approaches. On the monitoring end of the policy actions, we are looking at how the whole of the Global Action Plan can be monitored, taking a fairly standard approach, looking for outputs, outcomes, and impact, and looking for indicators around each of those. And as my colleague Michael from the Commonwealth Institute already mentioned, we're working very closely so that we are aligned and coherent and not duplicating or different. And so where it comes to monitoring in the physical education and the school setting, we're very much working with and alongside the work of UNESCO and the Commonwealth and all the partners to see if we can improve how physical education is measured globally so we can benchmark and track progress. And we're also looking in the sports sector, and both are quite difficult. So we do need to have these indicators, and the work that the Commonwealth and UNESCO are leading is essential. We're also doing other areas which are here, but for today's presentation, I'll leave you to look out for the monitoring framework that will be produced by WHO in the very near future. So my third area and contribution I think WHO brings to this issue is global advocacy. And so one of the highlights which I want to forecast for 2021 is that WHO will be doing a global status report on physical activity. This slide shows you covers of a range of other global status reports, and you can see very important topics: prevention of suicide, road safety, diabetes, violence, but never has there been one on physical activity. So I'm very pleased to announce and forecast that this will be a major production and publication for 2021, to which the monitoring and the data that I've just introduced will be presented, but not just data. We actually want to show stories and examples and make the case for investing more in all forms of physical activity, including quality PE. To achieve our common goals, we need to work in partnership, and I've heard that by almost all of the earlier speakers this morning. WHO is working in partnership across the UN. We have at the UN Interagency Task Force on NCDs, regular meetings and opportunities to bring physical activity, physical education and sport to the discussion table. And it's one of those discussions and of course subsequent work that is leading the WHO and the monitoring of the Kazan Action Plan and the Global Action Plan to be very much aligned. We're also working and meet with the agencies interested in focal points of sport for development and peace. So I'm very pleased to say that within the UN system, increasingly physical activity in all its forms through sport and PE is getting further and further attention. We have to mobilize that attention toward the policy actions and then of course supporting country action. The other partnership, which may be new to many of you, is we're working equally hard with UN Habitat and UNEP on addressing the environments in which we live and aligning with sustainable mobility and the new urban environment, because these are the places we live, work and play and go to school. And of course, they've got to support physical activity for all. Road safety is a major issue, air quality is a major issue, and we need to look at both of those. And we've got forthcoming guidance, very advanced document I mentioned on the walking and cycling agenda. And of course, that will intersect very nicely with how schools can promote walking and cycling as a modality to and from school, and of course then contribute to reducing congestion, traffic injury and fatalities, and air pollution. So I want to end with that overview of WHO's contribution, which is across really the global policy, the global advocacy, and then supporting policy implementation through tools and monitoring. We're a partner alongside the sport and education sectors, working closely with UNESCO and the sporting entities and education. And we're very much hoping that we can strengthen those partnerships to achieve our common goals. So thank you very much for this opportunity to join this important meeting. Thank you.
Professor Bull, thank you very much for this really great presentation. I have one question for you from the audience. Physical activity substantially decreased due to the introduced restrictive measures during COVID-19. Are you planning to amend the recommendations in the new guideline and action plan considering the limited possibilities for movement? If so, what would you modify? And what are your messages in this regard to the decision makers?
Thank you for the question, a very important one, and a whole meeting in itself. No, we're not planning to modify the recommendations because the relationships between physical activity through the body systems and physiology haven't changed. But what has changed due to COVID is the opportunities, whether that's through restrictions on leaving the home, and of course the places we're wanting to be active might well be under some restrictions and closures. So what it's called for is a policy focus on ensuring that alternatives are available, that promotion of being active in new ways, even if that's in the home, for everyone are provided, and accelerating the partnerships, such as we've heard, where the industry and sports sector and physical education is providing the opportunities for children through the internet, through technology, and through other ways. So it's challenging on how we're active through these times, but the guidelines on being active won't be changing.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for the answer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Készült Magyarország kormánya megbízásából az Európai Unió támogatásával.